So you've done this creation in your Premiere Plus to create, and now we need to actually stitch it out. So this is just going to give you a couple of hints on what to do. So let's get started. Don't forget, you need certain things, and here's a list of the supplies again, so that if you need to be reminded of what you need. So let's actually get started on actually doing the stitch out. Okay, don't forget your supplies to get you started. This is for stitching out the little gnome you created in the software. So I have the 180 by 130 metal hoop. You don't necessarily need that. You can actually use the actual 5x7, the regular 5x7 no-show mesh. And I need sewing thread for bobbin and for the top. You can use embroidery thread, but nothing's going to be seen, so you don't need to use that necessarily. Your fabrics are going to be a couple of different things. You're going to need some fur, and I have a piece cut. Now in the instructions I say 3 by 5, so it basically is 5 inches across here, and I've just got it here. So when you cut this going across down here, you want to make sure that you get your fur kind of up and out of the way so you can actually cut along here. So when you get this sewn out, this comes down like this. So that's your fur, and then you need a 2.5 by 5 inch for the trim, and this is Sherpa, but you could use fleece, you could use just about anything you wanted. Whoops, get that out of the way. And then you need a 4 by 5 piece for the hat. And so this is what I'm going to use for my hat. And then I decided my back is actually going to be the same thing. So this is the back, and I actually have this set up kind of like I do the other one, so I don't have to, I do a little stitching along the seam. This is actually folded. This is going to be a piece. It's going to come down here. And if you're doing a plaid, don't forget you want to try and match that up. So I folded this in 1/4 and 1/4 and then pressed it. So it's all set and ready to go. So that's those. And then I have, I can use a pom-pom for the hat. A couple of different choices. It's going to be personal preference for your choice. Then what I did for the nose, you could use wooden beads, which I have tons of. Or you could use, I took an old stocking that I've washed, and I stuffed it full of fiberfill, and then took a rubber band. And so what I'll do is this will actually get placed where the nose is. I'll probably trim this off and then hot glue it in place, or you could actually sew it in place if you wanted to. Of course, you need some fiberfill. You need plastic pellets. These are these poly pellets, and that's to give your gnome some weight so that it won't fall over. You just put a little bit of this down in the bottom. And then you can use a glue gun, or you can hand sew your nose and back and all the rest of it. So that's personal preference. Now I'm using a 90 embroidery titanium needle. That's going to be personal preference again. And this is my favorite tool for when I'm doing these kinds of things, because it has this rotary blade that is actually on a scallop. You could use pinking shears, but I like it because it's easy to get in nice and close. So let's actually get started and actually sew it out. Okay, so I've hooped my fabric, and I'm using the metal hoop. Now I tend to tape a lot on the back side to hold that kind of in place, and then kind of wrap the no-show mesh around, and then use my magnets to kind of do that. It gives me just enough, and it's nice and close to the actual bed of the machine. If I put it on top, it sits a little bit high, so I like to have it right close next to the machine. So then the first thing we're going to do, the very first thing, and it's going to sew, is an outline stitch, so it tells me where I'm going to be laying all my fabric. Okay, so I stitched out up to my first stop. The other thing I recommend you do is you turn off your trim command, your cutter, just because when a stop happens, it automatically assumes you want to cut the thread. So I like to shut that off for this kind of thing. But it just so, because remember, we made sure there weren't going to be a lot of jump stitches in this. So I just shut it off, and I don't have to worry about it. I'm doing this now. Normally I would do this in white, but I'm doing it in red so you can actually see it. So it's sewn an outline stitch, and then it's sewn this placement line for me to put my beard fabric. So I'm just laying my beard fabric down, and I've got it lined up along where that red stitch line was. Now again, you don't have to use red. I just used red for this purpose so that you can actually see what's going on. So when you turn your jump stitch trim command off so your cutter doesn't work, you sometimes will get that little note that says stop and cut the thread. Well, you don't need to do that. So just so you know, now I've got this so that it's got the beard sewn and it's sewn along here. You can just barely see that red line, and I'm going to just kind of take that and I'm going to move that up so it's out of my way. Now I could take and trim this now if I wanted to. I just want to make sure I've got enough that when this gets ready to sew and actually sew together, that I've got some beard that's going to come down below. So I'm going to do the next step, and the next step is actually putting on the trim. So hang on. Okay, I wanted to throw this back in here just real quick. I printed this when I was in Ultra after I created everything. And remember I showed you when you print this, it will show you all these fun things. It tells you, you know, what to do at each step. And it's hard to see in here. I'm sorry. See if I can get that any closer. But what I did is I know exactly where I'm at. So I'm now at, I've got the trim fabric wrong side up with raw edge near stitch line. So that's going to be what my next step is, and that's that trim. Okay, so now I've sewn my trim, and remember I did that little loop up here. Remember you thought we're crazy for doing this, but what this is going to allow me to do, and I'm going to raise this up, and I'm going to slide this up like this. Now I just want this to come straight across, and now let's see if I can get that in here. I've just got this folded straight. There's like a little pocket right here, and that's going to allow us to kind of put that nose in there. So I'm going to just lay my trim up like this, and I'm going to sew the next thing. So before you get ready to sew the hat part on, what I want to do is I'm actually going to trim this off. So I've got that stitch line that's going across here, and I'm going to trim this excess off just to get it out of the way, give me so I don't have quite so much bulk. Okay, so I'm going to lay my fabric with the right side down, wrong side up, and this one is got, you can see the gold better on one side than you can on the other. So it's going to, you're just going to have to watch that and make sure that it's wrong side up, right side down, and we're going to stitch this next to the next step. I should have pointed out that when I laid this fabric, the stitch line, I made sure that this was above the stitch line about 1/4 of an inch. So it just kind of gives me, it's going to sew right along that stitch line. And so now the next step you need to do is you need to fold, after it sews that down, you're going to fold that up like that. And we're going to sew the next step. So it's going to hold this down in place for us. Okay, so the last step is actually going to be sewing the back piece on so that we can flip it. Now, what you want to do is make sure when you're doing this that you're doing this correctly. You're going to lay them down so that it's right side down, and what I like to do is this piece that I folded, this little edge, so that I have a nice clean edge, that's the first one I'm going to lay down. And you're going to lay it down, and you can try and match up. If you're doing a plaid, you can try and match up your plaids. I'm going to do the best I can and see what happens. And then the other thing you want to do, again, wrong side up, right side down, and then I'm just going to cover that so that it covers up over the top. And again, try and match your plaid if you're doing a plaid. I just decided I got tired of doing the regular one, so I'm trying to match my plaids up, at least so that they're vertically matched up. I'm not going to worry about the other part of it, but at least it's close. And then you're going to sew the last step. So now we're all done. It's sewn all the way around, and we're all done. We're going to take it apart, and I'm going to cut it apart. So hang on a sec. Okay, so now I'm going to take those rotary, the pinking shear rotary cutter, and I'm going to actually cut along here. Now, I'm going to use a straight edge to kind of keep me from making too big of a mess, but you could also use your regular pinking shears. I like to get the bulk of it out of the way. So, and of course, mine are getting dull, so I'm going to use my pinking shears, but I'm going to trim all the way around this. Okay, and because I use the pinking shears, when I go to flip this, I'm going to get much nicer curves on this. So you're just going to take this baby and flip it around. Flip it around again, and you're almost done. Now I always take a little, you can take anything. I could take my finger and just kind of run it around, all the way around to kind of push everything out. And then what we're going to do is we're going to fill it. Oh, the other thing I like to do is kind of pull my things in here, but we can do that in a minute. Put some of your poly pellets in the bottom, and then you can stuff your hat. And then when you're all done with that, you could actually hand sew that if you wanted to, or you could use steam a seam, or you could use just about anything, whatever works for you. So hang on a second. So now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take and I'm going to kind of pull these out. Now you could use a little stick, you could use a needle, you could use, I have a little paint stick here that I'm just going to kind of pull my fur out so it kind of comes to the bottom. Now I don't have the back sealed very good yet, so I'm probably going to use a glue stick to get that done. And so now what I want to do is do the rest of my gnome. Now you could use a bead. Now remember we made that little pocket? So you kind of put that bead up in there. You could take that stocking like I said, and I would probably trim some of this off, and then you can kind of bead that up inside there. And then you're going to take and you're going to glue stick this on. So hang on a sec. Okay, so what do you think? All done. I used a little bit of glue. Again, you could use, and because I've used a bead, I could have actually sewn that on in place. You could put a button there instead. You could sew your pom-pom on the top, however you want. But because it's got those poly pellets in the bottom, it makes it really easy to stand up. So I hope I get to see samples. Looking forward to it.
As always, I like to end it with make sure that you subscribe to my channel, like and share my videos, make comments. Comments are always welcome, and I'll try and answer any questions you have. And after stitching it out, make sure that you post a picture to the Linda Stitchens group, and by posting pictures, it encourages me to do more. And then also, you can also put them on the Premiere Plus and 60 software users group and let them know where you got it. So hope to see samples. Thanks.